So, ladies and gentlemen, after the undisputed defeat David Wood had from Alex O'Connor, or David Wood suffered, rather, I would use the word suffer from Alex O'Connor, Avery has this to say.
David Wood and Alex O'Connor just had a fire debate on whether or not Jesus claimed to be God, and I happened to be there in attendance. And let me tell you, it was very entertaining. I enjoyed it. I think that David came out on top ultimately. David Wood did an amazing job demonstrating how Jesus claimed to be Yahweh and pre-existed his human birth. And the writers of Hebrews as well clearly lays out that Jesus pre-existed.
Every without mentioning words said, David Wood won the debate, subhanAllah, as if we did not watch the debate. Remember, I made a video regarding the debate and I said some Christians really felt disappointed that David Wood underperformed. They really thought David Wood was going to roast Alex O'Connor, but the reverse was the case. That Sam Shamoun even said David Wood was steamrolled by Alex O'Connor.
You let Alex steamroll you on the Gospel of John, and now he's going to be a superstar.
And I totally agree. David Wood was actually steamrolled by Alex O'Connor. You just have to watch the debate yourself. Don't take my words for it or Sam Shamoun's word for it. Go watch the debate with an open heart. Don't be biased in any way, shape, or form. Look at the evidence he's brought and look at how this guy was just all over the place, stuttering and all that. And to be honest, I'm beginning to concede to the statement of Sam Shamoun, where he said David Wood surrounds himself with people that are scared of calling him out. And this is obvious when we see Ruslan, for example, and we see Avery. These guys are scared of calling David Wood out for fear, according to Sam Shamoun, for fear that David Wood is going to ostracize them, excommunicate them, and cut them off.
But because David Wood will surround himself with people who won't call him out because they don't want to then be ostracized by him and have him cut them off. The hell with that, man. It's not about your reputation. It's about the glory of the Lord Jesus Christ.
This is the fear they have. But then this is not the argument here. So the argument here is Avery trying to hammer on something he said, that if Alex O'Connor denies the pre-existence of Jesus, then what can he say regarding Hebrews? Then he quoted a verse from Hebrews where Moses fears the reproach of Christ and looks forward to the reward. So let's listen.
And so you don't have Jesus directly speaking in Hebrews. And so I was surprised that Alex went to Hebrews, let alone Hebrews chapter 1, to argue that Jesus did not pre-exist. So I, immediately recognized this. And like Hebrews chapter 1 is one of my favorite chapters. It's really the last place you want to go to try to prove that Jesus is not God or that he did not pre-exist his human birth. Hebrews, the book of Hebrews, period, is the last place you want to go. And here's why.
Oh, got a question from Avery. All right.
All right, for sure. What's going on, guys? So this is a question for Alex, man. How you doing, man?
Hey,
you mentioned,
Godlogic.
Yes, sir. You mentioned in Hebrews 1 where, God is speaking, or God spoke to our, through prophets. Now he speaks to us through his son. And you're saying, where was Jesus then, back then? He should have been active. And so, regarding Hebrews, I just want to read you this and get your thoughts on this, okay? It's Hebrews 11. Regarding Moses, it says, by faith, Moses, and I'm going to just skip down to 25 and 26 for time, choosing rather to be mistreated with the people of God than to enjoy the fleeting pleasures of sin, he considered the reproach of Christ greater wealth than the treasures of Egypt, for he was looking to the reward. So how is it that Moses can be considering Christ's disapproval if Christ wasn't around for him to disapprove?
Yeah, that is a great question. So Christ there, he regarded disgrace for the sake of Christ is greater value than the treasures of Egypt because he was looking ahead to his reward. Now, that's something which I think it's a good point. I mean, of course, I can offer a Christological interpretation of this, which sort of says that Christ is promised as the Redeemer of mankind, and we're looking at this in retro. Where's he gone? Oh, there you are. And we're looking at it, just dropped it in left. And I suppose we're looking at this in retrospect, and he regarded disgrace for the sake of Christ. Yeah, I do think that in this instance, Hebrews is probably presenting Jesus as, I don't know about the angel of Yahweh, but certainly we're looking at a high Christology in Hebrews, yeah.
So close.
But, yeah, I see what you're saying.
All right, let's go to the next question. He's so close, guys.
But I have no, for what it's worth, I have no problem saying that Hebrews has a high Christology. That's kind of not an issue to me. But I think it is interesting to suggest that as a retort to the idea of the angel of Yahweh being Jesus, I think that is an excellent point. Yeah.
Now you guys saw it. This means that Christ pre-existed, and it was in the presence of Moses. Moses was aware of Christ, was in his presence, and feared him, had a respect and reverence for Christ. before we get Christ being born of a human?
So I must say Alex O'Connor was caught off guard by this question, and probably because he has never seen something like this before and he wouldn't know how to approach the question. Although he said, of course, he can argue the case, but then when seeing something like this for the first time, you'd want to digest it, you would want to see the context of this statement and what it implies. I believe this guy needs time, but then there is a way out. Okay, there is a way you can argue this. Why? Because when we look at the Bible as a whole, would see that according to the Bible, Jesus is coming to reward people according to their deeds. First of all, let's go to the verse quoted by Avery in Hebrews and read so we can get to understand the responses I'll be giving, inshallah. So we'll be looking at Hebrews chapter 11 verse 25 to 26. So the author said, choosing rather to share ill treatment with the people of God than to enjoy the fleeting pleasures of sin. 26. He considered abuse suffered for the Christ. So abuse suffered for the Christ to be greater wealth than the treasures of Egypt, for he was looking ahead to the reward. In Revelation 22:12, we would see that Jesus made an important statement here that would further make us understand Hebrews 11:25 to 26. He said, look, I am coming soon, bringing my reward. Remember, what was Moses looking forward to? He was looking forward to the reward. So he feels that suffering for the Christ is a better treasure than what he would get in Egypt, for he is looking forward to what? To the reward. And this is the reward Jesus is talking about here. Bringing my reward with me to repay all people, in other words, all nations, according to their deeds. So Moses knew that someone is coming that would judge and reward people according to their deeds. When we look at John 5:22 and of course 27, where Jesus himself said, moreover, the Father judges no one, but has entrusted all judgment to the Son, and he has given him authority to judge, because he is the Son of Man. Acts 17:31, it says here that, for he has set a day for judging the world with justice. Who set the day? God. And this is why Jesus said, no one knows the hour, the angels, even the Son doesn't know the hour except the Father. So the Father, who is God, has set a day for judging the world with justice by the man he has appointed. This further established the fact that Jesus has no authority whatsoever, but the authority given to him by God to judge the world. And he proved to everyone who this is by raising Christ from the dead. So at the end of the day, this is what Moses was looking forward to, not as if Christ pre-existed before his existence on earth. So moving forward, Avery also made some claims to establish the fact that Jesus is God and all that. And he said Hebrews is a place that you shouldn't go, because this clearly shows that Jesus is God without any iota of doubt.
Now, guys, he quoted Hebrews 1. We could have stayed in Hebrews 1. I just wanted to, I just couldn't believe it. Hebrews 11, good. Hebrews 1 shuts this down. And you guys know it. We've been through this. You guys have seen it yourself. If you've been watching this channel, you've seen it enough. Hebrews 1, you cannot go to Hebrews 1 and think that it's not going to teach the pre-existent Christ. Look, this is what we have here, guys. In Hebrews 1, this is how it starts off with, just like how Alex read it, right? Long ago, at many times and in many ways, God spoke to our fathers by the prophets. But in these last days, he has spoken to us by his Son. Now, this is where Alex stopped. He stopped there. He did not quote the full verse. Watch what the full verse says in verse 2. But in these last days, he has spoken to us by his Son, whom he appointed the heir of all things, through whom he also created the world. What? So you mean to tell me in the same verse that Alex quotes, it literally says that Jesus pre-existed the world? And in the Hebrew, in the Greek, it actually means the ages, the times. Jesus pre-existed the times and created the times. Huh? And you go here? No way. And guys, this is just verse 2. Let's keep going. He is the radiance of the glory of God and the exact imprint of his nature, and he upholds the universe by the word of his power. My goodness. Doesn't sound like some mere man to me. Doesn't sound like some mere prophet or some angel. This is God himself, the second person of the Trinity, who upholds and sustains the universe by the word of his power, and who is the exact imprint of the nature of the Father. That means that whatever the Father is, Christ is also. They have the same exact nature. This is Hebrews 1. No way. Let's keep going. After making purification of sins, He sat down at the right hand of the Majesty on high, having become as much superior to the angels as the name he inherited is more excellent than theirs. Now,
hold up. Wait a minute. Something ain't right.
let's keep going, because what the Father says about the Son, it's done. It's over. I know it was over already in verse 2, but watch as we continue. But of the Son, he says, your throne, O God, is forever and ever. The scepter of uprightness is the scepter of your kingdom. You have loved righteousness and hated wickedness. Therefore, God, your God, has anointed you with the oil of gladness beyond your companions. Oh, Avery, it's over. Right there. Boom. You see? Therefore, God, your God. There's no way Jesus is God. He doesn't share the same nature. No. Right? It's over. No way. You have, obviously, where Jesus takes on flesh, humbles himself as the servant, and according to Jeremiah 32:27, God is the God of all flesh. So when Jesus becomes flesh, the Father becomes his God. That's why in Psalms 22 it says, at my mother's womb you became my God, right? So it's once Jesus takes on flesh and takes on that role of a servant, the Father becomes his God in that sense. Not that he's a separate God than the Son, or they're not separate, but it's his relation with the Father according to his flesh. Now we see that the Father calls him God, exalts him, anoints him, but what else does the Father say? You, Lord, laid the foundation of the earth in the beginning, and the heavens are the work of your hands. This is the Father calling the Son Lord, and it's quoting Psalm 102, which is referring to Yahweh, actually. So really, the Father is identifying Jesus as Yahweh, who laid the foundation of the earth and worked out the heavens with his hands. He did it. He's Yahweh, according to the Father. They will perish, but you remain. They will wear out like a garment. Like a robe, you will roll them up. Like a garment that will be changed, but you are the same, and your years will have no end. There we have it, ladies and gentlemen. Hebrews chapter 1, the very chapter that Alex O'Connor went to try to disprove the pre-incarnate Christ, actually bolsters the pre-incarnate Christ with no doubt.
So quickly, without wasting time, let's look at Hebrews 1 from verse 1 to verse 12. And before then, let's remember that Hebrews, the author is unknown, and from where this is coming is totally unknown. But then it is believed that it should form part of the canon, and that's why it's here. So but then let's look at Hebrews verse 1 to verse 12 and respond accordingly. So in Hebrews verse 1, it says, long ago God spoke to our ancestors in many and various ways by the prophets. Of course, this is undisputed. We know God spoke to the people via the prophets, right? But in these last days, he has spoken to us by a son whom he appointed heir of all things. Okay, and this is fact. We see in the Gospels that Jesus spoke to the people, and this is coming from who? From God the Father, through whom he also created the worlds. 3, we would see that it says he is the reflection of God's glory and the exact imprint of God's very being. If this means that Jesus is in the image of God, this is totally correct. We see this in, of course, the Bible, in the New Testament, where God said, let's create man in our image. This is, of course, understandable, but for you to see in the very exact being, then you must show us where Jesus made that statement that he is the exact imprint of God's being. So we can now reference whoever said this to what Jesus said in the Gospels or whatever it is in the New Testament. Again, the condition has to be Jesus himself saying these exact words. Secondly, one of the implications of your statement, Jesus is in the exact imprint of God's being, is that we won't be able to see Jesus. It is a known fact that we cannot see God because of his being. Okay, whoever sees God will die. But we can see Jesus, which means maybe this is referencing us back to the statement of God, the Father, where he said, let's create man in our image. So it could be that this is what it means. So a lot of things we should consider, before we take this literally. And he sustains all things by his powerful word. When he had made purification for sins, he sat down at the right hand of the Majesty on high. For having become as much superior to angels as the name he has inherited. Of course, we'll see, in fact, Alex O'Connor made references to this. Inheriting the name of God makes you superior to even the angels. An angel inherited the name of God, and God said people should be careful not to offend the angel. Why? Because he doesn't forgive. Okay, and the reason is he has inherited the name above every other name. So if Jesus inherited this name, it means he was made superior to the angels. So in verse 5 it says, for to which of the angels did God ever say, you are my son, today I have have begotten you, or again, I will be his father and he will be my son. We'll see this in John, and also we'll look at verse 6. It says, and again, when he brings the firstborn into the world, he says, let God's angels worship him. Where do we find this? So please, if any Christian know where this is in the New Testament, please let us know, because the statement reads, when God, not before, when God brought his firstborn into the world, he says, let all God's angels worship him. So we are waiting for this. We know there's a similar thing here in the Old Testament where God, in Deuteronomy, if I'm not mistaken, the song of Moses in Deuteronomy chapter 32, in verse 42, it says, I will make my arrows dunk with blood, while my sword devours flesh, the blood of the slain and the captives, the head of the enemy leaders. So in 43, this is where he got that from. Rejoice, O heavens, with him, and let all God's angels worship him. So this is where he took this from and claimed that this was said by God to the angels, or whatever the case is. So that's plagiarism, and it's a lie. God never said so. Moses was reciting this song to the people, and when you read further, you see it referring to someone else that would defend his children. So verse 7, of the angels he says, he makes his angels winds and his servants flames of fire. Verse 8, but of the Son he says, your throne, O God, is forever and ever, and the righteous scepter is the scepter of your kingdom. Where did God say this in the New Testament? There's no place whatsoever where God made a reference to him saying, your throne, O God, referring to Jesus, is forever and ever, and the righteous scepter is the scepter of your kingdom. We'd also see, let's continue, because it's a huge plagiarism. Verse 9, it says, you have loved righteousness and hated wickedness, therefore God, your God, has anointed you with the oil of gladness beyond your companions. So this verse is saying that God is speaking to Jesus. This is nowhere to be found in the New Testament, but then there is a place in the Old Testament in Psalms. Of course, Psalms 45 would see a reference to this. So let's quickly go to Psalm 45. So verse 6, it says, your throne, O God, endures forever and ever, your royal scepter is a scepter of equity. Verse 7, you love righteousness and hate wickedness, therefore God, your God, has anointed you with the oil of gladness beyond your companions. So one might ask, God doesn't have a God. So Avery defended this by saying, when Jesus assumes his human nature, God became his God. So let's look at the historical context of this. Let's go to verse 1 and see what is this talking about. My heart overflows with a goodly theme. I address my verses to the king. My tongue is like the pen of a ready scribe. So who is this verses addressed to, and who is the person talking? First and foremost, historically, we know this is addressed to the King Solomon, and of course this is written by the sons of Korah. You can browse this, you can read this yourself. This Psalm 45 is written by the sons of Korah. These are musicians. Okay, so the question now is this God speaking? Because in Hebrews verse 8 to 9 it says God says this to the son. Are the sons of Korah God? Of course not. This is not God speaking. The author, we know the author, and this is not addressed in any way, shape, or form to Jesus, but then to the King Solomon. You can read this for yourself and you would see that, this is not far from what I'm saying. This is addressed to King Solomon, or a divinic king, and this is done at a royal wedding. So moving forward, Hebrews verse 10, it says, and in the beginning, Lord, you founded the earth, and the heavens are the work of your hands. So where is this written in the New Testament? Nowhere. This cannot be found in the New Testament. So verse 11, they will perish, but you remain. They will all wear out like clothing. Like a cloak, you will roll them up, and like clothing, they will be changed, but you are the same, and your years will never end. So where are these statements in the New Testament? God saying these things in the New Testament? Nowhere. So, but this guy made a reference that God said this. Where are they in the scriptures? Nowhere. But then we can see something similar in Psalms 102, which indicates that this was also plagiarized and changed, that God actually said this, while this wasn't said by God. In fact, looking at Psalms 102 verse 1, it says, hear my prayer, O Lord, let my cry come to you. Do not hide your face from me in the day of my distress. Incline your ear to me, answer me speedily in the day when I call. So this was written by someone in distress. However, it was changed that God said so. So let's look at verse 25 in Psalms 102. It says, long ago you laid the foundation of the earth, and the heavens are the work of your hands. Remember, this person in distress is the one talking to God directly. So 26, it says, they will perish, but you endure. They will all wear out like a garment. You change them like clothing, and they will pass away, but you are the same, and your years have no end. So as you can see, it is a copy and paste thing here, that God actually said this to Jesus. Subhanallah. How can you build your faith based on this? Worse is, we don't even know the author of Hebrews. But then you believe that God said these things while God never said these things. So Avery should be ashamed of himself, claiming that these verses indicate that Jesus is God and no one should go to Hebrews. Hebrews was copied from Psalms and then pasted there. Also Deuteronomy, where we made reference to what Moses was saying to the people. So with this, I hope you understand that these guys are not really interested in the truth. They are not really interested in the nuances and don't dig deep to realizing that God never said this. So with this, I say Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. I remain your brother Abdul. Catch you in the next one.